All right, let's move on to this now. President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa's congratulations to Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa on his re-election after last Wednesday's polls was on the basis that the country's electoral commission had declared him the winner. This despite the SADC observer mission expressing its reservations on the recently concluded elections in that country. Ramaphosa says SADC is engaging on the Zimbabwean elections, which the regional body said fell short of the constitutional requirements of Zimbabwe and the region. The Citizens Coalition for Change Party of Nelson Chamisa has rejected the Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission's declaration, and SADC now fears an outbreak of the violence post the re-election of ZANU PF's Mnangagwa. All right, let's stay with this particular story now and speak to Professor David Moore, who's the author of Mugabe's Legacy, Coups, Conspiracies, and the Conceits of Power in Zimbabwe. Prof, thank you so much for your time this evening. Do appreciate it. There's been a lot of talk around, what is going on in Zimbabwe on the ground, and a number of people, of course, saying that sometimes issues may be exaggerated. Others are saying it's the true reflection. You just came back from there. What's the mood like?
Well, yesterday I was told about people sitting in pubs and unidentified officers coming in. They had new police uniforms, but people weren't quite sure who they were. And a couple of days ago, there was I think it was Saturday, there was a press conference, and there was a bit of a scuffle because the police tried to arrest the CCC spokesman. And one guy was abducted. I think they've released him today. I just saw a quick Twitter just now. But a lot of people are escaping. But it's certainly nothing like in 2018, when they were a bit slow in the view of the opposition for getting the results out. And there were a lot of demonstrations, and 6 people were killed, and a lot of innocent bystanders. So I think that people in the streets don't want to see that happen again. So they're kind of apathetic, but the regime is putting its foot down and putting its stamp on its victory. It's kind of interesting. There haven't been too many hopes about too many elections recently in Zimbabwe being free and fair, but there are differences in the way each one goes. And this one was kind of interesting in a few ways, but you can ask me more questions about other things if you want. We can get into that later, Bongi.
Yeah, and Prof, I mean, you talk about the situation on the ground and also just a description depending on who you're speaking to. Because yesterday, for example, we, speaking to ZANU PF, and they say everything was above board. You speak to the CCC, they raise concerns. The observer missions as well raising concerns, and so one then wonders, what exactly, right now is going on in Zimbabwe? Is there a celebration of this particular win? Because the ZANU PF says there are celebrations. And then you listen to the CCC who are saying, no, this is a travesty. People are simply upset.
Well, the people I was talking to yesterday were not ZANU PF, but they had been, privy to some insights into ZANU PF, and they said there's really not a lot of celebration within that party. It's kind of a quiet victory. There are a lot of tensions within ZANU PF. One of the new things in this campaign was the emergence of Forward Associates Zimbabwe, which is kind of a combination of a pretend kind of NGO, pretend civil society organization, but a lot of kind of thuggish behavior as well, intimidating a lot of voters for a lot of time in advance of the elections, even at the level of ZANU PF itself in their primary elections, primary nominations for candidates, because there is this long simmering tension that actually was the root of the soft coup or the purge in 2017, by which the present President Emmerson Mnangagwa got into power. And so there are still the remnants of the faction that lost that coup trying to get in. And the presidential candidate who was not allowed to be a candidate, Xavier Kazikwarere, is the representative of that old tendency. So the party itself is not really as intact as it might be. So yeah, nobody was celebrating really. You had this announcement, which was kind of cold. And already, as you say, the observation teams ranging from SADC to the EU to an independent organization from the United States did put a lot of doubt on this election. So I think what may happen in the region, and you told us about South Africa's president, sort of celebrating this while the SADC forum, condemned the election. But this indicates the tensions in SADC. So we have Zambia, and the leader of the delegation was seen as, an old vice president from a liberal regime, a non-liberation party. And you might have Botswana sort of pitched against South Africa and the Liberation Party countries. So it's going to open up tensions at that level, as well as, of course, there's still, I don't think we're quite sure if the CCC is going to take the results to the electoral court.
And if pardon me,
Yeah,
Prof, pardon me. If they do, what chances do they have, according to you? Because we've seen this in the past, and it doesn't really result into any physical change. So do you think this time around, if they should explore that avenue, they might be lucky?
Well, I doubt it, and I suppose that's why they're still thinking about it. But it does raise the profile again. It makes the issues more apparent. The courts aren't really trusted as being neutral. So you would have the chase for more, I'm sure you've discussed these V11 posters that you're supposed to put outside every polling booth after the results are in. Well, the raids on the election NGOs were actually to get those images. And I think they got them because the election NGOs didn't have much time to put them together. So you've got 12,000 images there. Various organizations have them. I presume ZEC has them, but they're not going to let them loose unless they're absolutely convinced that they are accurate. And there was also this issue of the very slow ballot papers in about 75 constituencies. Some people waited all day to vote. Some people had to go back the next day. What happened, while they were waiting? People left, maybe different ballot, people are very suspicious. So there's still these doubts overhanging in everybody's head, and they could come out in the court. We may get more evidence. So and the CCC could kind of escalate the court proceedings to put more pressure on the regime, but they may also decide not to go to Parliament.
Do you think the statement?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pardon me, do you think the statement that was released by the president, and he now says, of course, this was done, just after because the election result was declared, but do you think it was premature for South Africa to release a congratulatory statement through the president?
It could be. It was interesting in Sunday's media in Harare. They made a big deal of Chissano, the former president of Mozambique, who's the head of SADC right now, I think, and he's also the head of some kind of debt reconciliation committee in Zimbabwe. And he said, he was very much against the SADC report. Maybe Ramaphosa is following that line. Maybe he's kind of putting his hat in the ring, saying that it's going to be a tough go. They will have to be more relaxed than that observation team meant. It also, some ideas floating around are that if the SADC group couldn't really decide, what to say one way or the other, they might do what they did in 2008, is persuade the parties in Zimbabwe to negotiate a kind of coalition. That happened in 2008 after many murders and torture and so on, as the run-up came into place in June 2008. Here we had a date was set in October 2nd, I think, if there had been a runoff. If there had been a runoff, I think if there was juggling with the numbers, and there usually is, so everybody is suspicious, if there was a bit of juggling in the case of a potential runoff, it might have been to avoid that kind of situation. So it could be kind of postponing the real decision until the parties and the region can decide, okay, do we kind of let this go, or do we push towards a negotiated settlement? Some people in civil society are hoping that would happen because it would settle things down a bit. Maybe, you know, if you had a good finance minister in, you could get the economy going, because the economy is really not looking very good.
All right. Prof, thank you so much for that. And let's see what happens in the coming days. Whether or not the challenge is put to the courts, what happens with that on that particular front? Do we see a recount? Do we not? Let's see what happens, and I hope we speak again. That is Professor David Moore, author of Mugabe Legacy, Coups, Conspiracies, and the Conceits of Power in Zimbabwe.